Welcome to The Uprising, a podcast of LibertyNation.com. This is your host, Scott Cosenza. And what a week it's been for those pining for Donald Trump's tax records and pining about and fretting over the Mueller Report and all those bad actors that we have to really discover before the next election. And neither of those two things could be about embarrassing Donald Trump or frustrating his attempts to win re-election or keep other Republicans out of office. No. It's all so we can learn and find out what happened to our democracy, except, of course, if any of that inquiry may point to somebody away from Donald Trump or Republicans. So because I really never hear anybody talk about it in the legacy media, I think it's always important to remind everyone that the only reason that these people are seeking Donald Trump's tax returns is because they believe once published, they can use the information to damage him politically because he paid so little as a percentage of his wealth in income tax. And they're right. But they're lying when they tell you it has anything to do about Russia or the election or anything else. Now, how do I know this? How do I divine what goes on in the hearts of progressives and Democrat political operatives? Well, no, I can't divine their intentions and their true feelings, but what I know for sure is that anybody who says that they need Donald Trump's tax records to find out what interests he may have, what financial interests he may have and benefit from, is lying to you. And the reason why they're lying is because the President of the United States has to file, and candidates for President of the United States have to file an exhaustive financial disclosure. Donald Trump has filed one. In fact, he's filed 3 before he ran and every year he's been president. In that document, it discloses every financial interest that the president or candidate has. Donald Trump's entry, in fact, I'm looking at the one from, I think, 2017. There are over 500 different LLCs, corporations, partnerships, you name it, that he has a financial interest in. You can go and look up their names. You can find out who the secretary, the treasurer is, the amount. All this stuff is available for anybody who wants to take a look at it. It's not a secret. So anybody who tells you that they need this tax information for something other than to use his tax rate and payments as a cudgel against him politically is simply being dishonest. All you'd have to do is come up with a single company or partnership or enterprise that he has a financial interest that he didn't disclose on that form, and that would be big trouble for Donald Trump. So we're expected to believe basically that he was in league with the Russians and maybe some oligarchs and some funny business, but then chose to what? File tax returns on that? He wanted to pay tax on the dirty money? Come on. It doesn't make any sense. And if there was a press that wasn't just aligned against Donald Trump, you'd know it before now if you didn't already. Because instead of breathlessly reporting the Democrats' demands for this information, they might ask, well, have you read the financial disclosure report? And how would this be more instructive or informative for you? Alas, that's not what we hear. But you have the uprising for it, I suppose. Well, if it's not about Russian collusion, then what is it about? The next election. It has to do with embarrassing him so that he doesn't win re-election. And I think that's a lot about what we're seeing now with the Mueller Report. Well, there's sort of 2 branches of that. There's the Trump derangement syndrome branch, and then there's the political election branch. How I think that breaks out is there's a certain universe of people who really did think that there was going to be some evidence of Donald Trump being a Russian asset or spy. The sort of, maybe Rachel Maddows of the world, or certainly the people that were glued to her program that have now abandoned it. And they are convinced that because they're convinced, just like the divinity of their God, that Donald Trump was a Russian colluder, that it is a Russian agent or Russian asset. And no matter what you tell them, they're never going to believe otherwise. So if you tell them that the summary says that he isn't or shows that he isn't, well, then it must be buried in the details. And then once the actual report's released, we'll hear more about how, well, it must have been left out of the details. But there'll be no peace for them. But then the other side is, I think, the more common, and that's the ones who are looking to use this information for political gain, because that's their stock in trade. I haven't decided for myself whether I think the report should be released in its entirety or unredacted or not. And one of the main reasons why, or in fact perhaps the sole reason why, is because when Special Counselor Mueller takes these people before the grand jury and asks them questions about themselves and their dealings, they can't lie and they can't remain silent if they want to stay out of jail. So they have to tell him. And to call the subpoena power and testimonial, the demands for testimony that a special counsel can bring to a potential suspect or witness invasive is an understatement. That we know, or reasonably can know, that Donald Trump was not an asset, did not collude with Russians, or was in league to spy with Russia against the interests of the United States or his top deputies and lieutenants in the campaign, well, then you can say that, well, the information that the special counsel has gleaned from them, to the exclusion of that which has been referred for criminal referral, is private information. And who they had business dealings with, who they had extramarital or otherwise relations with, is not the business of the public, when they would have to have disclosed private facts in the course of the investigation. And it's reasonable for those people, I think, to expect that their private facts should be held private. So while there can be very good reasons for demanding the report's release, there can also be solid reasons for saying some of the material presented in the report should remain redacted, and it's not appropriate to release it publicly, even if it doesn't implicate national security. But the behavior of government actors, well, now that's an interesting question. They don't have that privacy interest in what they've undertaken to do on the public's dime, in the public's name. The derangement syndrome sufferers, the naturally occurring ones, the Maddow group, and also the political motivated ones that are propagating it, don't seem to be interested in that latter part of the inquiry, though. Here's the Democrat Senate Minority Leader Dick Durbin and member of the Judiciary Committee on NBC News.
Well, I think there should be a complete disclosure of the Mueller report. I was standing in the subway in Chicago on Friday, and a lady came up to me named Deborah, and she said, "We paid for that inquiry. Why can't we see the report?" She's not a professional politician by any means, but I think she speaks for most of America. I don't want to dwell on it, but I think it's important we at least see what Bob Mueller produced.
I think most of America cares about whether Donald Trump is a Russian spy, because that's what you had them wondering about. And the rest of it is just the details. Well, how many Americans are going to read this report? I mean, most journalists aren't going to read it, so I will, because I'm a glutton for punishment. But most Americans, no, they're not going to read it. Maybe they want a real summary that was detailed by somebody who's not a direct appointment from the president, and that makes sense. But I don't hear such a clamor for it from my neighbors and friends. What about getting into the whole genesis of the false report to begin with? Can we get into that?
You sit on the Judiciary Committee. The chairman there, Republican from South Carolina, Lindsey Graham, has indicated he wants to do some investigating of the investigators. How did this get started? He has said he wants to talk about Comey. Are you with him on this? Do you think that's an investigation that's necessary?
I don't want to return to Travelgate, Benghazi, the Clinton emails. I think we can move forward from here. We ought to focus on the counterintelligence aspects of this and the security of the 2020 election.
So Deborah really needs to read the report to understand what went on and what happened with our election. But she doesn't want to know how our country was turned upside down and in some ways paralyzed for years, where the sort of a popular mass delusion that the president was somehow a foreign agent, a Russian agent, or under their control. Deborah doesn't want to hear about that? Nice job with the linking it to Travelgate, a Clinton-era scandal, and Benghazi, an Obama scandal. I, for one, would like to actually get back into both of those, but I recognize I'm perhaps in the majority there. But it might be interesting to find out why the upper echelons of the FBI conspired to ruin Donald Trump's presidency and, in fact, perhaps conspired to see that he be removed from office against his will. Is that maybe worth could we get a hearing, just a little under oath on that? I mean, we know that the former FBI director James Comey lied under oath to the U.S. Congress. Are you outraged about that perjury? No, we don't hear it from you, do we? What about from some of the Democrats who would be president and replace the Donald to our betterment? Senator Nice, Amy Klobuchar, was on ABC News where they asked her if she believed that water was wet.
The investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. You obviously, I know, want to see the full report, but do you have any reason to doubt that principal conclusion, and that's the big one, that there was no collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians?
I want to see the report. All we have is a 4-page summary. And I think the major reason that we need to see the report right now, in addition to getting all the details, is to know what we should do to protect our elections and to protect our democracy going into 2020.
Love the refusal to answer a direct question. Does she have any reason to doubt the principal conclusion? The most important thing, the whole thing, right? The whole shebang. I mean, sure, the Russians bought a couple $1,000s worth of Facebook ads and sent a spoof email or 3 million. But was Trump a Russian spy? I mean, that's why we got into this whole shindig, right?
Certainly much more to learn, but we do know directly from Mueller, I mean, his words quoted exactly that he found no evidence of a conspiracy between members of the campaign or the president and the Russian government. I'm just asking, do you accept that conclusion, fully understanding you want to see much more, but do you accept that conclusion from the special counsel?
Jonathan, I am a former prosecutor, and I believe in looking at evidence. I don't have the report. I think it is important that the Justice Department announce that they're going to give us the report, and then I can make that assessment myself. But I think the main thing here is the public wants to see the report. 420 members of the House of Representatives unanimously voted that they want to see the report. So then let's see the report.
When the report that she reads accurately states the quoted text that Barr released in his letter, that Mueller himself says there's no Russian collusion with Trump or his people and the Russian government, is she then going to demand the actual evidence in terms of what, grand jury transcripts? Is she going to demand bank account statements? I mean, the report is the report. Barr quotes from the report for the key part, the only part that matters. Not good enough for her, except that she is a former prosecutor, and I think we all know that she knows there's no Russian collusion, but because she's running for president and can fundraise off it, and because of the progressives and the moonbats who are totally bought into it, the Rachel Maddow holdouts, well, she can't say no or she agrees that there's no collusion, because then those people will think that she's just one of them, quote unquote. No, she has to maintain this idea that there could be some collusion out there, and we have to get the report. And of course, the best thing for them would be to never get the report and to always just ask for it, because then the reality of the no collusion never has to sink in. So it's like the tax returns. They're always just out there. You can always go back to raise money off them or deflect or attack on that point. It's like a nice security blanket.